This is Kenneth Strange, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
I love it. I love getting a chance to do this. One of the things that's neat about having a show is, when you're established like I am, the show books itself quite a lot. You got it, and because I put things out on LinkedIn and wherever else, you guys can find me in a lot of places. But the neatest people arrive at my doorstep. And so, yes, I reach out and book people,
Right.
but it's like the old days when you could like knock on someone's door and have a conversation, or you can go out to the mailbox and you would be like, "Oh, I got a letter from somebody," like these
Right.
wonderful things would show up. And so I sort of have a modern mailbox where wonderful things show up, and I get to meet the neatest people. So thanks for reaching out. I'm thrilled to have you on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. My great pleasure.
Yeah. You when you go to a party, what do you describe yourself as doing? Like what do you do, Ken? And what do you say?
Well, I like kind of like humor. I enjoy comedy, self-effacing humor, and it's just kind of an icebreaker. Maybe I'll say, "Hi, I'm the most interesting man in the world," and people will
Yeah.
start laughing, and I'll say, "Hey, I have traveled to 65 countries. I speak a few languages, but yeah, I'm a people person, Pete, and I enjoy mixing but listening, listening to people first, and then trying to understand where they're coming from, what they love to do. I'm curious. I'm a curious person.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. What did you just say?
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Funny. I was wrapping it all together. I was doing your comedy bit, and then making fun of the listening thing. That's how funny we are around here. When you it is true, when you get to go to exotic places like we both have done, you do have a lot of things to say and anecdotes to provide. But I find myself quite often like I often sit and I can just for sure entertain people with all of these fancy things.
Yeah.
But folks still want to get things off their chest. They still want to talk. They still want to check in. They still want to ask 1,000 questions. And
Right.
it is interesting when you go to a party and you have our kind of experiences because you don't have to be the center of attention.
No, that's right. I think, I feel pretty comfortable in my own skin. Kind of what's the phrase? Been there, done that. So, I can sit back and enjoy the party, or like you said, Pete, if I meet someone and we hit it off, we can go back and forth and a little bit of entertaining, spinning a yarn or anecdote, as you said.
Yeah. I'm gonna put Ken's website up here, everybody. You guys can go check it out. You guys know how to do this. It's his name with the .com at the end of it. Hey, big surprise. Okay, so go there and check out everything. And you can see over his left shoulder, he's got his latest book, Cop's Son, and then I'm gonna put the link for that up here in a second. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask you when did you prove up? You've worked in federal capacity in the kind of the law enforcement realm for a long time. When did you go, "Oh, I don't have to rep my resume every time I show up and meet somebody"? When did you have that in you?
You're talking within the federal system or afterward?
Well, yeah, actually, thinking about that. Yes, let's do both. When you go to a professional setting and everybody's giving their resume in some form or fashion,
right.
and when you've been around, you're like, yeah, we don't need that. You wouldn't be here unless you already had the resume. Calm down, relax, right?
Right.
So when did you calm down, relax, and go, I belong in this room full of all these people who are seasoned? Of course, we all have degrees. Of course, we all have language capacity. Of course, we all have experience.
Yeah.
Let's not worry about all of that. Let's get focused on the thing that's in front of us. When did you get to that point?
I think that was in my third federal career with the Department of Justice. At that point, I had, I spent 12 years with them, and I was being promoted through the system, and so I wasn't really trying to prove anything anymore. Whereas when I landed on JTTF over in Newark, I was an unknown. These were I was looking at men and women that were, just at a frenetic pace, and I had to prove myself. Although I had been in the Middle East, and I knew terrorism probably better than anybody, even in Quantico. But I still, people were looking at me. You got to prove yourself. And then when I went over to the Agency for International Development, working in Washington and working overseas in Costa Rica and Egypt, Now I was learning fraud, so I was kind of on, trying to assimilate that. I mean, I enjoyed the travel part. That I was used to traveling. I was used to the Middle East, that type of thing. But here I was learning a new discipline, and so I was still proving myself. So the answer to the question, short answer, is probably with the Department of Justice. I said, look, I'm here. I've made it. I've been promoted twice, so I don't need to bullshit people.
Right. And then what arrived first, that realization or the one in your personal day-to-day life where you're like, I've done these things? Like you get someone online, it's like, you don't know what you're talking about, like that, wait, we'll see about that. You just kind of don't care, right? They have a critique. But yeah, when did that arrive for you? Just as Ken, the guy down the street where you didn't have to prove up anymore. When did you know you had proved up for you, not just professionally, but just in the big world?
Again, probably the same time frame, Pete. The third job where people were depending on me now for guidance and advice, and we had to plan things and operations and things like that. In a way, in that little microcosm, I had become the man in that office in the region, in the Western region with all these states, and of course, I'm mixing with counterparts. I'm local, state, federal, other FBI, for example. And it's interesting because, I was an FBI agent, and now with the Department of Justice, I was investigating FBI agents. So I would say that during that period of time, I just said, you know what, just relax, trust yourself, trust your instincts, and you'll be fine. That type of thing.
You have multiple language capacity. Which language do you think is the most valuable for you in your professional life? Which one has opened the most doors?
Well, look, that's a great question. I entered the FBI under the Spanish language program, and it's kind of funny because that would never have happened had it not been for my father, who was a cop, and who, when I was very young, I was living in Brooklyn. I must have been 10 or 11 years old, and he's down in the basement like one Saturday morning. I hear him speaking a language, and I'm like, what the? I go, Dad, what are you doing? And there's a record player, one of these 33 record players, and he's repeating, Isabel, Arturo, Bueno, and I said, what is that? And he said, Ken, this is Spanish. Join me. I want you to hear it, and I want you to practice with me. And so I practiced with him. Like every Saturday morning, I fell in love with the language, and before you know it, I'm taking it in high school. I'm visiting Spain. I'm in Spain, junior year abroad in Madrid. I'm teaching high school Spanish once I get out of college. So that my father kind of, not only with the law enforcement, him being a cop, but the Spanish thing that he encouraged me to learn, that opened a door to me to get into the bureau. So that was, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. I thought for sure you were going to say Arabic too, but yeah, you got Spanish in New York. That's not the common path. Not that you can't do it, but I was ready for you to say, "Oh, my grandma was, Mexican, and she rode with, Pancho Villa, and we used to make tortillas together, and so I learned Spanish." That's what I was ready for.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, but I've heard the story. But no, Spanish. I fell in love with Spanish, and and then that led to the Middle East because I remember when I was teaching in high school in New York, the administration said, look, we have foreigners in this school, lots of foreigners. They are they're Somoza grandkids. We also had the five families as well, Gambino, Genovese, but they were the American kids, right? So I was teaching them Spanish, and then I ended up, the administration said, we will pay you to learn English, get an ESL certificate. And I'm like, hey, I don't know English. I don't feel comfortable doing that. Well, we'll pay for it. Okay, I'll try it. And then the next thing you know, I'm teaching English, and that opened the door to Saudi Arabia, where someone in the Houston consulate calls me and says, hey, would you like to go to Saudi Arabia and teach English at a school for the royal family? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Is this a joke? And they, no joke. You got your tickets right here. And sure enough, and then the next day, and I'm living at home. I'm making $8,200 a year and a free lunch. So
Yeah.
I was ready to move out of the house and get on with something with some. So that led me to Saudi Arabia, and then that led me to all this terrorism stuff.
Yeah, and I swear I'm gonna let Ken talk here. Ken Rock talk.
Hey Ken, hi there.
I have one more question. When you start learning Arabic, it must have been pretty quick that you went, "Holy shit, there's a lot of Spanish in Arabic," or more appropriately, there's a lot of Arabic in Spanish. That always surprises folks when they hear that. But there's
Yeah.
so much Arabic influence in everything, in English and in Spanish.
You're absolutely right. You spot on. And it's funny. I remember maybe the first few days I'm at this school, and they had some of the teachers are speaking Arabic, and I'm like, was that a Spanish word I heard in there? Is that could that? It sounds like wazir and emir, and some of these words sound very close to Spanish. And then of course, I know the history of the conquest of Spain. So I'm like, okay, maybe that's what's happening here.
Yeah. Ken, thanks
Good
for coming
morning.
in and joining us.
Hi there. How are you, sir?
I'm well, Ken. Good to meet you. Yeah, I think a blind spot to a lot of Americans is maybe knowing that history you were just talking about the Islamic conquest of Spain, and then the Reconquista as the Spaniards and their allies and French, purged the Iberian Peninsula
That's right,
of
boy. You got it.
the Moorish influences. But you do see that influence. You see that influence in Mesoamerica and South America. You can see some of that Arabic influence still because they weren't that far removed from the Reconquest when the Spanish conquest of Central and South America started. So
Absolutely right. And that's right. And you can see that sometimes in the architecture, Spanish architecture, where they still have those vestiges of the Moorish, the from the Arab world. Absolutely, the connection is so strong, actually.
yeah. And I suppose when you were learning and practicing that Spanish in New York, you had a little bit of a Puerto Rican accent to it.
Well, I did a junior year abroad in Spain, so I had problems readjusting when I came back to the States. I'm speaking Castellano, la geografía, civilización, with the THs. And my Puerto Rican Dominicans are looking at me like, "Oh man, you're loco. You're loco." That's
Yeah.
that's not Spanish.
I had
Yeah.
the privilege of being on a international NATO counterintelligence team for 3 years, and I shared an office with an agent from Spain, and the Spanish Army agent. And I walked in the first day of my desk right next to him. I said, "This is great. I'm going to be able to practice my Spanish all the time and get really good at it." And about 3 or 4 days in, his name was Juan Antonio. He suddenly put his hands on his ears and he said, "Stop, your ugly Mexican Spanish is hurting my ears." Because he
Oh,
was the proper Castilian Spanish speaker, and he didn't like what he called my ugly Mexican Spanish from
that's funny.
working as a deputy on the border for many years and growing up in Southern California. So
Absolutely.
people
That's
don't realize that there's no monoculture of Latins. They're very distinctive, very divisive in some places, Spanish cultures, and that's reflected in their traditions, but also in their language and the way they say things. You've got places in the Western Hemisphere, Southern South America, that are very Castilian in their Spanish, and then you've got places where it's been amalgamated with other Mesoamerican languages and ancient languages from those countries. So
right.
again, most Americans unfortunately have such a narrow focus and scope on anything outside the United States that they just want to put them all together in one lump.
Yeah, no, it's not. Absolutely, it's not like that. And I mean, the influence of Spain is just enormous, as you know. And we see it, right? I mean, we see it here with the Spanish missions in California, which is which is fascinating.
Yeah, I grew up in a mission town in Southern California. One of Father Sarah's missions, founded in 1782, I believe. As a kid, grow up in California. I forget which year. I think it's maybe in 4th or 5th grade. You study California history, and the Spanish mission system that was established in the 1700s is very much part of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's had a great influence, and I think one of the things I loved most about the culture in California growing up, and I think it's disappeared in a lot of ways, was that harmonic relationship between old Spain, old Mexico, and old California, and the way people were able to adapt. And I've always said that after In-N-Out, burritos, my home food, I'll always claim In-N-Out as my first. But so interesting. What give us an example of one of the times when these language skills that you developed over time just really paid dividends for you, whether it was using the fact that you spoke the language, or whether it was listening to people speak the language that you didn't necessarily know that you spoke the language.
Yeah, that's a great question. And for some reason, I was thinking of indigenous Indians in Mexico that I had to deal with. They crossed the border, had been apprehended, and but as I'm speaking Spanish with them, they told me this is not our first language. We speak I don't know, it's an Indian, actually an Indian dialect. But more importantly, I think for me, the Arabic came in very useful in my first job with the Terrorism Task Force because my thing was confidential sources and informants. And so when I went out, and most of my work was Middle East terrorism, obviously, but I mean, I did work Black Liberation Army, I did work Sikhs, I did work Jewish Defense League, and even some IRA cases. But most of my stuff was Middle East. And so when I went out and I met people and I was making contacts, I would chit chat with them in Arabic, and I would, little gestures that went a long way. Like if I shook someone's hand, I would then take it to my heart, and the Arab people would see that and say, oh, okay, this dude, he's okay. He knows my culture. He takes tea with me. It's not a one and done thing. Like, give me the information and I'm out of here. It's a relationship. And so I would say that my knowledge of Arabic and the Middle East culture, more than anything, opened up a lot of doors to me. And the relationships it was like a force multiplier. So I would go out there and they would introduce me and bring me in with their circle of friends, and they'd whisper to me, that person is a jihadist. He's no good. And you got to meet the imam. Let's meet the imam. And so, it was like a spider web of contacts, principally because of my affinity for the people in the Middle East.
Yeah, I don't know if you realize it, but you were just absolutely speaking Pete Turner's love language.
Oh, yeah.
Things that
Yeah.
Pete did, and those techniques as an agent working in the Middle East for the army and stuff. But those are, those skills across, all these different agencies and all these different types of missions. But it comes down to that cultural IQ, and that ability to build rapport is going to dictate the outcome of any encounter. And again, it's a hard thing to teach. And a lot of times people don't, especially Americans that have such a narrow focus on life, that they don't understand things outside the United States. They struggle to pick that up. But you were definitely speaking Pete's love language there, because I know my friend.
Amen.
Well, one of the things I wanted to jump in and say as we were getting into this part of the, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely, Pete. Go for it.
Oh, I was going to say, well, I guess I'll put myself in the big window here for a sec. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, because you know about the similarities between Spanish and Arabic, when you go to a place like Saudi Arabia and you start to learn them, if you allow the Arabs, the Islamic people, to be smart, to have impact on our culture, our language, the things that we do that we don't even know about, the science, the poetry, if you allow them to shine, man, they'll come running to you because you're acknowledging the greatness of their society. They know that they're the cradle of civilization. They know all these things, but we say, Sumar, the hell's Sumar? Who cares about that? I know where Texas is, and if you allow yourself to not be the smartest person in the room, if you allow them to have a great culture and a heritage and a history that's wonderful,
amen.
Boy, oh boy, they are desperate to get to know you because they want to talk to you about what they're proud about. And if you get someone's pride to go up and lead them, They'll tell me anything.
Absolutely. You nailed it. Pete, you've nailed it. But I learned this not, not in the law enforcement at first. I was teaching in Saudi Arabia to, princes from the royal family. And what I found is, and you know this because you've been there, they're kind of a people that tell stories. They're some of the best storytellers that I know. That they could spin a yarn, and camels and Bedouins and people from the desert and the princess and all of this stuff. So, and I learned that, and I harnessed that with these kids. I mean, these were grades 3 to 12, right? And they talk to me about their culture, and sometimes they break up off into Arabic, and I'd bring them back and say, no, keep that thought, but let's try to do this in English. Tell us that story. And boy, they love that, and they look forward to come in and talk about their culture in English, which I found fascinating, and I certainly I learned so much from them, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah. The the exchange when you're working when you're doing your job, your particular brand of this, and terrorism is a thing to everybody. If you're watching, if you're dealing in the terrorism world, it's a little difficult to just stand on principle and everything. So you have to allow some of this culture and the religion to guide where you're at, because otherwise you'll stay very America centric.
Yeah.
Because terrorism it's an easy thing to point out, like that's bad, but it's at the end of the thing. It's the bomb that's bad. I don't like that. But all of the things around that, where you're trying to work, where you're trying to identify, hey, these are problem areas. That's what I'm talking about. Like, how do you get a sense for that? Where the terrorism begins, where it seeds, where it festers, way before the person Al Akbars or whatever it's going to be that they do.
Yeah, and I'd have to say, Pete, that goes back to the relationships that you're forming out there, and it's not just, and this, it's not just Muslims, but they're Coptics, and there's Assyrians and Chaldeans, and you're running into all these Arab, this mosaic of Arabic peoples, and Christians as well. And it's just kind of getting to know them, and having a meal, taking tea, going out into the street with them at a diner, that type of thing. And then finally someone says, I need to talk to you about something serious. There's a very bad person that just flew in from Jordan, and he doesn't belong here. He's not a good person. I need to tell you about this. I don't want any money for it. He's just not good for the neighborhood here in this area, whether it be Jersey City or Patterson, places like that. And then you start, okay, all right, well, let's keep this quiet. And then you start, who else? And then you start kind of putting that person, the new person, under the microscope. But always, just circulating within your circle of Arab friends and sources. I hate to call them informants. Some of them were informants, and they said, I want money. Okay, if that's what turns you on. Other people like, no money. I love America, and I brought my family here. And this is the Islam that we do not believe in. This is the false Islam. And please help us get rid of that person. He's a bad person. That type of thing.
Yeah. We had our schism hundreds of years ago, and it was bloody and awful and hard, and then we slowly transitioned into different problems, but they're sort of still sorting out their schism on who they're going to be and what they're going to be. And a lot of this death cult stuff, it doesn't represent Islam in a very good way. There's a lot of that in there. There's a lot of negative things in the Bible, but we've, for whatever reason, gotten past that. How do you work through those things? Like, do you think in those kind of timelines, like, hey, if this was 500 years ago, we would have a whole lot of terrorism going on too?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a student of history, so I kind of understand that these things are evolving all the time. And look, with what's happening today with sleeper cells and lone wolves and this thing with Iraq, Iran, excuse me, Iran. My mind is into Iraq. I'm dating myself, but yeah, I mean, I just saw something the other day. I said this is pretty interesting. So I noticed that this was in Patterson, maybe this month, where the city council voted 5-4 to approve the call to prayer, Salah, 5 times a day, and using democracy, the 5-4 vote in the council to get what they needed and what they wanted. Now, I thought, wow, we've come a long way. Yes, there are going to be some problems to that, things like noise, and what time will it be restricted to certain times? But I just thought, man, that is, for me, that's the ground shifting under my feet. You're seeing, and then when you look at the Muslim fertility, American Muslim fertility rates are much higher than the American rates. So I'm thinking I've just seen a huge change, and I think in 50 years, if this continues, the country is going to look different. It's going to be different. I'm not saying better or worse. It's just going to be different.
You talked about several groups that you had the opportunity to work against, for lack of a better term, and I sort of have a 2-part question to follow up on that, and maybe the same answer to both. But what terrorist organization or what specific terrorist ethnic group did you find the most difficult to counter, and which one fascinated you the most when you looked at these individual groups and their heritage?
Yeah, well, Ken, they all fascinated me. I became a student of these groups, and we in Newark we worked Islamic Jihad, we worked Abu Nidal, we worked PLO. PLO at the time was, as you know, of course, that's not a recognized terrorist group any longer. But I would say there was kind of this, this was 1990, 92, 93. So. I was going out on like search warrants of the Meyer. It all started with the Meyer Kahane assassination, and then we all rolled out, and then that introduced me to Said Nozair, and then Nozair was connected to some other Egyptians, Mahmoud Abu Khalima. And there was some Palestinians, Mohammed Salame. These are all people that would turn up in the First World Trade bombing. So these people were problematic, and they would tell you that, oh, we're here, we're Americans, we love America, we're a member of Sam's Club, but at night, they were plotting jihad and destruction. They hated Jews, and they had many of them had come back from Afghanistan with a chip on their shoulder, and then probably the thing that really got my attention and kind of shook me up is when, and this was a person I had been following as a teacher, as a school teacher, and when I finished up in Saudi Arabia, on the way back to the States, I stopped in Cairo, and I said to the taxi driver, "Take me out to the grandstand outside Cairo. I want to check this out." And he just looked at me like, huh? Majnoon, Anta Majnoon. And I said, la, just take me there. So I get there, and the grandstand was empty. It was eerie, and there was still bullet holes from where Sadat had been assassinated by, Egyptian Jihad, Islamic Jihad. And I was poking my finger in the bullet holes. This was 4 years after he had been assassinated, and I knew about this cleric, Sheikh, the blind Sheikh, Omar Abdul Rahman.
Right.
And I knew that he had been involved in this, and he might have been involved with the fatwa to go ahead to assassinate. And I never imagined that I would get from that place as a civilian, and that I would end up confronting him on a street corner in Jersey City with his bodyguard, face to face, in Arabic, and telling him, "These are your deportation papers. My friends here from the INS would like to give these to you. You're not welcome here." And he's like, "Oh, your Arabic sucks. It's zift. Your Arabic is zift." I'm like, oh Jesus, he just called it shit. He just called my Arabic shit, literally tar, zift. But I didn't like him for that. But I knew that this guy was just so much trouble, and he's at the mosques, and he's just whipping everyone up into a frenzy. So this became my kind of day in and day out. These people, this group of ragtag jihadists that had come into our neighborhoods, and then of course, then I'm working Cuban intelligence. Hey, strange, Diaz is out. You got to fill in for him, and then there's a Sikh matter down the street, and so you'd have to break away from these jihadists. We didn't have a lot of people, to cover all of this. So that they were always a perpetual pain in the ass to me. And I'd say this group was problematic. Although later, after I left the FBI, a unit chief from Washington, D.C. called me and he said, "Congratulations, you've made it on the top 10 Hezbollah list." And I said, "What?" I said, "Hezbollah? I never worked Hezbollah matters." And he said, "Well, you must have pissed somebody off. But, we've got this information from two friendly foreign intelligence agencies." And so, you just never knew. I guess you never knew who was out there.
Yeah. You made it to a certain extent. And I know earlier on in the conversation, you were talking with Pete about when you really felt you'd made it. But I ended up on a similar list with an outlaw motorcycle gang as a law enforcement officer. And had a couple of agents from another agency come and visit me to let me know that they'd uncover that. So, in one way you feel proud that obviously I'm having an effect, and the other way you get a little bit of a pucker factor because,
Yes.
one more group against you. You mentioned earlier the IRA, and I always found the IRA, and I did never work directly against the IRA, but I, again, was on an international team that was in a British framework. And so the Brits were obviously very still preoccupied in the 90s with the IRA, and I found it fascinating studying them. And one of the reasons I think I found it the most difficult is, of all the different groups, they were the most like me. I couldn't separate them linguistically or culturally from me. It was almost like, in a way, working a homegrown group because you could see yourself in them. And though we try to do that with other groups, it's harder to see ourselves as part of, let's say, an Islamic group or a Palestinian-based group, because one, we don't have the historical trauma that they choose to live every day.
Right.
But two, the cultural differences are so vast. So we haven't heard a lot about the IRA recently. I know that, especially in the Northeast, they were very much fundraising in the United States there.
That's right. That's right. That's
I
right.
don't know about how much direct action they ever took. They may have at some point in time.
Yeah.
But what was your experiences with working against the IRA in the United States?
Well, Ken, frankly, I only worked one case related to the IRA, and it was my first case. And so I had been, they had an older agent that was kind of taking me around, showing me the ropes. And then finally it came to the point where he said, "Dude, you're on your own now. I mean, we are few and they are many. And so, I can't be babysitting for you forever." So he cut me loose. I got this lead, and I'll never forget it. It was it was right outside Newark, and it was a fella, an Irish national, that was allegedly involved in the murder of a British Army captain. And so I learned a few things that on that visit. I kind of cold call, and he when I showed my badge, and it's the first time I realized the effect that the badge has on people. That's the first time, because when I said FBI, I mean, his eyes were like, holy, he was like scared as to death. So anyway, I talked myself into the apartment, and so I was sitting there, and I said, I'm this, I'm that. I introduced myself. How about you? Could you tell me a little bit about yourself? What are you doing here? And finally, I got around to it. But the other thing I noticed, and I know you guys know this very well, is the body language was I mean, this guy was kind of rocking back and forth, and he had his arms like this folded, and he just wouldn't calm down. There was no way he would calm down. And then I said, "Do you have any connection to the Irish Republican Army?" I know nothing. I know nothing about that stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And and then I saw a book on the on. He had like a mantle, and there was a book, something to do with the Troubles. And I said, "You know nothing about that?" And he goes, nothing. I know nothing. I said, "Okay." And I said, "Hey, check that book out on the mantle and mantle place." And we got the book, and I said, "This is the trouble. This is IRA stuff." And he goes, "Oh, you don't know nothing about that. Nothing about that." And you know, I knew he was lying. But then I'm faced with, I don't have any evidence. You know, what am I going to do? So I'm powerless. You know, he's probably involved in some way, shape, or form with that murder. Maybe, possibly. The language told me that maybe, very possibly. But there was nothing else I could do. I had to make a case, and I was never able to make that case. So that was for me, that was a big, that situation was a big lesson all the way around.
Yeah, I think you may have done a lot more good than maybe you're giving yourself credit for, because defensively, like you said, the power of that badge, the power of the three-letter agencies, he knew he was on the radar at that point in time, and his likelihood of perpetrating additional actions here in the United States was probably diminished. So it was a very good defensive move, even if you did not have enough to necessarily submit for a prosecution at that point in time. Hopefully it curtailed any other bad things that could have happened in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. When I told my mother, who's Irish, complete Irish descent, that I was chasing after IRA people, she was stunned, like, "Oh my God, no, you can't do that. That's the IRA." It's okay, Mom. It's okay. I'm with the government.
Yeah. Anything
Yeah.
short, he could have
Yeah.
walked in. They had the IRA video playing of things in North Ireland with the great Celtic music in the background. He probably still would have known anything. That seemed to be the screensaver for many years of anybody involved in Irish Republican activities, is to have those videos playing on a loop.
There you go.
That Celtic music playing over the top of all the scenes of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So it was a sad chapter. I think it was a sad chapter for everybody that was involved in it.
Yeah,
It was also very fascinating when you look at, as I mentioned earlier, we know that their monetary support primarily came out of two places: the northeastern United States
that's
and
right.
Australia.
That's right. Yeah,
And
Australia, I don't know, but I remember Boston was a big place. New York and Boston, they had some representatives there that were big time spokespeople, right? Spokespeople.
yeah, and when you get Tom Clancy's attention and he writes that as a subplot within one of his books, you probably
Patriot Games.
yeah,
Patriot Games. I
Patriot
remember.
Game. So fascinating stuff.
Hey, by the way,
How did we get through the Troubles? I mean, back in the 80s, 90s, if we would have had someone from the future say, "Hey, the Troubles are almost over, you guys. Like, we're gonna crack this nut." And I'm not saying everything's perfect in Ireland, but the Troubles are over. So how did we do that, and can we repeat that success?
yeah, I mean, I thought it was Pete. I thought it was kind of a political process that eventually, I guess the populations in Northern Ireland and the South that just grew tired of all the killing and whatever. And I'm sure there was some uh, maybe some interaction with the United Kingdom as well. But I think all parties just decided, hey, it's time to put the killing to bed. This is just, we can't do this anymore. I think the IRA, I think they kind of overstepped themselves a little bit, maybe when they blew up Mountbatten.
Mhm.
That was a tough one, and I think that drew a lot of attention to themselves. And it's kind of interesting because since that time, I've actually been in touch with two IRA people. One an American fella that ended up going over and volunteering. Um, and he went to prison for a while. He's out, and got to talk to him about what he was doing. And then the other time, I'm doing. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I'm looking for my neighbor. She was kidnapped or abducted or vanished. She vanished in Dublin, my New York neighbor, in March 1993, and is never seen again. So there was, we chased serial killers. We did this. We did that. One of the possibilities, there was a suspected IRA member and who was also a pedophile supposedly, and the story was that she had met him. They had gone out to a pub. He talked out of turn, and then he was drunk, and then afterwards he said, I've got to kill this girl. I just told her about some IRA secrets. So that made the media. That circulated for a long time, and I finally, to the point where I actually reached out. I went as pretty high up that ladder, that IRA ladder, and I said, "Can you help me with this allegation?" And the person was very candid, honest, and said, "Look, I feel your pain. I feel her mother's pain. I know about this allegation. I'm rejecting it. It's categorically false. And I'm telling you this: we would never permit anything like that to take place. We would never kill an American citizen." So I believe the guy. So we kind of threw that allegation out the door. But it's just interesting that we're investigating IRA, and then later, years and years later, I'm talking to these people and wondering, how did this ever take place? Now we're swords to plowshares.
Yeah, and I think I'd be remiss if we changed the subject without mentioning the connectivity and the connective tissue with the issues and the problems in the Middle East, and that being that the Americans allowed the British and the French to draw arbitrary lines on maps.
That's right.
That separated families, attempted to separate cultures, and those arbitrary drawing of lines, whether it be the Northern Ireland counties or the Levant in the Middle East.
Yes.
Those arbitrary lines in the last 100 years are probably one of the root causes of a lot of the issues we've dealt with, Pete and I specifically, in the Balkans, and those arbitrary lines that were drawn in the Balkans in the post-Versailles post-Versailles era. So even though I have some great and wonderful British friends, and even though I'm inducted into the Order of Lafayette with the French,
wow.
We cannot forget that anytime any nation state decides to arbitrarily draw lines at their own peril, ignoring culture, tradition, religious and familiar ties, are going to cause these kinds of problems. And they may fester for a while, they may bubble up right away, but eventually, as a Bosnian or a Bosniak, a Bosnian of the Muslim faith, told me once, "You guys won't be here forever, ever. Eventually you go home and we're going to finish what we started 600 years ago."
Wow.
So they have a long institutional memory for these.
Yeah. Oh, that's unbelievable. Yeah. That's frightening. But no, you're Ken, you're spot on with this thing about arbitrary lines, and I think Sykes-Picot, that treaty comes to mind in the Arab world. They had expected so much. And Pete, you're nodding, so they had expected so much, only to have the British kind of renege on, and then arbitrarily, Lebanon's going to be French, and this is going to be British, and this is going to be whatever. So it caused anguish and pain for so many years. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and that history compounds itself in a lot of ways when you take into account false histories and false myths that certain groups developed after those things happened to support what they want to happen next. And as agents and running sources, oftentimes we were confronted and had to overcome these falsehoods that were perpetuated. And this isn't necessarily against any particular group, but if you look back historically at the Levant, which seems to be the core of a lot of the problems in the Middle East, the day before the Israel declared itself a nation and the UN passed, what passport were all those people carrying? Well, they weren't Palestinian passports. They weren't British passports. They were Jordanian passports, and it was part of the greater Jordanian empire at that. And we've allowed this myth to develop that somehow Palestine existed. And I'm not an apologist for Israel or the Palestinians or anything else. I'm just like you, a historian.
Yeah.
And I look back and you sit there and say, well, what was this false expectation that was built up over time? And what was the reality? The reality was the people living in Gaza or their historical family in 1948 had Jordanian passports. They didn't have Palestinian passports.
Right.
But then here becomes the difficult part. Well, how do we as operators, how do we as agents, how do we as collectors overcome what we know is absolutely false? Do we agree with them? Do we give them credence? And then they run back to their group and say, yeah, I was speaking to the American and he acknowledged that, X, Y, and Z is actually true when we know categorically it's false. But we still need to get the information. We still need to work with it. How did you overcome those types of obstacles?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm forming a relationship with a person. They're getting to know me over time, and so there is hopefully trust building up between us. And I probably would have said something like, this is not the best situation, and there's two stories for every situation, but let's try to get through this together. We can figure it out later. But right now we just want to make sure that for public safety's sake that everybody's going to be safe, and we can talk politics later. And I promise you, I will come back and talk politics with you and share a meal and hummus and a chai with you. That's probably the way I would look at those things. I mean, I'm not there to convince people, and I've heard so many stories. I remember talking to a British a guy that was in the fighting the Stern Gang, the Jewish group, the Irgun and the Stern Gang, and he survived the King David Hotel bombing, and that's the first time I realized, wait a second, that's not only are there Arab terrorists, but there are Jewish terrorists out there as well. So the landscape is you can get cut out there. There's a lot of historical shards on the floor, but I think if you stay true to yourself and you build up trust with the person you're with, that you're working with, I think you'll be able to overcome some of those things.
Yeah. Before I kick it back to P real quick, I just point out you talked about the bombing at the King David Hotel and terrorism not being defined to one group, but never forget that one person's terrorist is the victor's freedom fighter.
Right. That's
they don't view themselves in the same light because you're victorious. You were doing it. The end or the means justified the ends that we finally got. So I'll kick it back to Pete because I've been asking a bunch of questions here.
Yeah, but it's all been the right stuff. I was thinking about lines and dates and these things that we compete over and that impact us. Obviously, Sykes-Picot didn't work. I mean, it caused lasting, maybe permanent scars and injuries. You look at the South and how they were treated, not just the racial stuff, but just how the politics worked out. And you see roads turn left, and you're like, hey, what happened to this road that was going to go through? And they don't get the factory. They don't. All these things lock a place in a way that. If you go across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, you'd be shocked at how boarded up it is in that little town right there. And these are the political impacts that cause guys like us trouble because, like, how am I going to tell anyone from any of those communities, like, oh, no, you guys have had it good. You didn't have someone you can't control putting their foot on your air hose. Of course they think that. And so when we look at the competition for stability in Bosnia, for example, where Ken and I were, there were not people walking around in burqas. There were Bosniaks who were eating medium rare pork that they'd grown themselves, drinking their own wine and Slivovitz and Rakia.
Yeah.
It was a very Jack Arab place, but we lost that competition in a lot of ways because what are you going to do? Become the authoritarian that says you can't practice your religion in a more fundamental sense? And so that part of that, It is a really hard problem to solve, and if we're going to put it on the Muslim Brotherhood, those guys kick their ass religiously.
Yeah. So I mean, so these are like stereotypes that just don't cut it, right?
Yeah.
No,
Well, also
I understand that. I understand
the
that.
reality that part of the reason we lost some of that fight in Bosnia, as Pete and I well know, is well, we were asking countries for competition or for compensation and assistance in bringing peace to the Balkans.
Right.
Some countries said, absolutely, I'm going to give you $100 million. Great, we can use it for X, Y, and Z. No, we build mosque. You know, you,
Oh, okay.
the specifically the Saudi royal family and others went in and donated millions and millions, and you suddenly had a skyline that used to be a multicultural skyline that's now
Right.
dominated by the minaret.
Oh, wow. Wow.
You know, I remember clearly the Japanese contribution to S4 were hundreds, if not thousands, of white Toyota Land Cruisers, and everybody knew if they were driving around a white Toyota Land Cruiser, going to be S4 because that's what the Japanese sent. But when the Bosnian people, and specifically the Bosniaks, as he mentioned, hey, we need a new hospital. The last one got blown up. You get mosque. Hey, we need a new power plant over here or a water facility. That's great. You get mosque. And so we sort of lost that culturally in a lot of ways because we allowed that. We right. The safety and the safe space that allowed them to do that.
Right.
And it actually didn't benefit us.
Wow, interesting. That's fascinating. I did not know that. That is interesting. Yeah, and I know Muslims were involved in that whole situation as well. But to be honest with you, I don't know as much about that situation as I do some of the others.
Just think about if you were given the keys to a field office and you're now in the Bosnia area, and now you have this we'll call it radical Islam problem, and you're trying to short circuit the growth maybe of that ideology, of their ability to recruit and exploit.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough mission.
Oh, it's got to be. Yeah, I don't know how you would cope with it.
A lot of the same history as you were talking about too, because what we ended up with there in the mid 90s were a lot of guys, like you said, you were ending up in Newark, that had been in Afghanistan, had fought as the Mujahideen, and now that war is gone. The Soviets are no longer there. Afghan still developing. And so where's the next fight? Well, the next fight becomes Bosnia. The next fight becomes take it to the US and those kinds of things. So it's interesting. You mentioned working in some internal affairs stuff. What was that like when you were working with the Department of Justice and working the internal affairs? Having done it myself, I know it's one of the most thankless jobs, and also one of those jobs that you don't always feel good on the surface going home, even though you may have done the right thing. You didn't necessarily feel good about it. So what was that like for you, and what time period were you doing that?
Yeah, so I mean that was probably 1998 to 2010, and you're right. You're not always the popular person as you walk through the door to interview people, and you're not being invited to Christmas parties from other agencies. You're pretty much the bogeyman. So I would just tell my people, don't go in there thinking you're going to be liked. Just do the job. Just do the job. Play no favorites, and just get the job done. And we're there to exonerate that person as much as we're there to incriminate them, or to gain some kind of a conviction or disciplinary outcome, or whatever it would be. But yeah, the unique problem that we faced in the Inspector General's office was you could investigate FBI agents, but at the same time, when you're doing let's say you're also working Bureau of Prison cases, and so now you're going to arrest somebody within the BOP, and now you need some bodies because we didn't have very many people. Sometimes on like an operational thing, you would actually go to the FBI, the same people you're investigating, and ask for help. So that was a little bit uncomfortable for me, but it was something that was done just because of manpower. But that made me a little bit uncomfortable. But yeah, some of the most of the stuff. I was on the southwest border, so a lot of the stuff was border patrol was pretty big. And at one time in 1998, there was a big rush to get agents to the border, and maybe they didn't spend enough time in training, or I don't know. They rushed. They were rushed. A lot of them were rushed to the border, and it was tough because some of them, they just fell a victim to corruption, to sex, to drugs, and sadly, for me, that was like with some of the border patrol, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. There was so many cases coming at you. I would sit down with someone and say, "Hey, these allegations against you," and they'd say, you could tell right away. Sometimes they're like, "Oh, okay, what should I do?" And I said, "You should tell me the truth. Should I remain in the border patrol?" And I said, "I don't know. What did you do?" I think I'm going to resign right now. Okay, all right, and on to the next one and the next one, because there was so much work. But most of it was border patrol, Bureau of Prisons. The FBI cases, the DEA cases were few and far between. There were some. Most of them were disciplinary cases, although the last case in El Paso that I was somewhat involved in was concerning a special agent in charge of the FBI, who, and the problem for these people is candor. It's the candor. It's when they start prevaricating or fudging, and I tell them I would tell them right up front, please, just you'll be okay. You might survive this if you just tell the truth. Okay, don't. But a lot of, some of them wouldn't do that. They would just, no, I didn't do it. And finally, oh, look, you did do it. Oh, shit. Yeah, I did do it, didn't I? Then you're screwed. So I saw some very kind of almost tragic cases. Some FBI agents that would just, oh my God, they had the future, all the future ahead of them. And just because they couldn't admit something, or they lied or fudged or whatever, that was the end of their career.
Yeah.
So,
and we make our careers in a lot of ways as collectors and agents on manipulating and using human frailty. And sometimes we forget, if we look in the mirror or we shine the spotlight back on our own team, we're going to find those same human weaknesses and human frailties that we want to exploit as collectors or as counterintelligence agents. But we turn it around and look right back at ourselves and we find those same things. And that can be uncomfortable. It can be very uncomfortable at times.
Hey, let's talk about this book real quick. Let me put the link up here. Oh, it's below Ken's face. And it's still below Ken's face. Let's talk about A Cop's Son.
Okay. Yeah. So I thought this would be a good time. I've been writing since I was 11 or 12 years old. And I've always enjoyed it. And when I was a kid, I lived in libraries. It seems that way. And I discovered Ray Bradbury, and I said, man, I want to write like this guy, and I want to be a writer. So finally, when I retired, I had a little more time on my hands, and I ran into I was working for a security company, and this vendor was talking to me, and he said, tell me about could you tell me a story, one of your federal stories? And I said, okay. So I told him the story, and he said, Jesus, you should write a book about this stuff. And that's when it dawned on me. I said, you know what, maybe I should, if anything, just for my kids, like a legacy thing, like you want to know what I did? This is what I did. So that's what I did. I put together this book, and always with the, my father was the cop, NYPD, 38 years. He had a storied career, and he saw everything, from the Harlem riots to the Pope's first visit to Serpico, the Knapp Commission, right up to the end when they were throwing Molotov cocktails at him in Tompkins Square, New York. So he had a fantastic history with NYPD. He was my major influence for so many reasons. And so I said, I'm going to put him in the book. He's in the book. And I'll just put some of the noteworthy cases that I worked. from the 3 different federal agencies.
The book, everybody, the link is right below, and I'm trying to get over there. Okay, there it is, right over there. You guys see me pointing towards it. That's how you support these things. You know what I always say: buy 2, buddy read, maybe even start a book club. Because I know this guy right here who's smiling as we talk about this stuff, he will talk to your book club. This is the amazing thing about authors. These guys want you to enjoy the book. They want to help you understand what's going on. And obviously, in this case, I mean, Ken wants you to talk about his dad with him. He would love that. And so, look, buy these books. Books make great gifts. I know I say these things all the time, but I say them because they're true. So this is how you support authors. This is how you get out there and go do it. Whether you buy it on Amazon or you buy it somewhere else, just get out and buy this book. If you know somebody in your life with some law enforcement, hey, it's a great book to put in front of them. There's Ken's website too, by the way. You can get all that information there. Ken, floor is yours.
Yeah, Ken and Pete, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. But also this NYPD connection that my father being in the NYPD, I reached out to Ray Kelly, who worked with my dad, and I said, "Would you look at the manuscript?" And he said, "For your dad, I'll do that." And he came back. He had a very nice cover quote. And then I knew Bill Bratton from out here in Los Angeles, and I contacted him, and he said, "Shoot me the manuscript, and I'll let you know." And then he came back with a very nice cover quote. So that NYPD Blue connection, it certainly helped.
Yeah, absolutely. Ken Orock, what do you have to say in closing before we wrap this up?
No, it sounds like it's a great read. I haven't had the opportunity with other things going through right now to do it, but I look forward to it. Not a cop son, but grandson, and it sort of influenced me, to go into law enforcement as a uniformed deputy at age 19, and then subsequently have a career that took me around the world as an Army counterintelligence agent and stuff. But again, I think as you alluded to, that street cop that comes up and is dealing with people every day and is there majority of the time on the worst day of their life, and when we're lucky once in a while on the best day of their life, when we've been able to make an impact, it does have an impact on us. And I think the effect that as fathers we can have on our sons by modeling that kind of behavior. My wife and I recently stopped for a prone individual that was proned out in a freezing rain in a parking lot. My wife's a trauma nurse, and we wouldn't think of driving by. And as we got done with that, my wife asked me, "Do you think our boys would stop if they saw that?" And I said, "Yeah, I think absolutely, because they've seen you and I do it their entire lives, and they've seen us be willing to extend that hand to assist and help people. And that happens in your formative years. It does make you into the person you later become. So I'm glad your dad lived such a great life and had such a good influence on you. And I look forward to reading the book, and I will get mine ordered today."
Thanks, Ken. Thank you.
All right. I love it. All right, everybody. We'll see you all later. There'll be, I guess we've got another show later on today. So yeah, I'm insane with these 2-a-days, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to do it anyhow. So I will see you all later. You two Kens hang out. I'll say goodbye to you in a second. Bye-bye, everybody.